Hello, and this video is going to be a quick introduction to ratios and how to solve them. First, we need to clarify what a ratio actually is, what it means, and when we should use it. So ratios are normally written like this. It would be x colon y. X being a number, y being a number. The colon we would pronounce as 2, so this we would say x2y. It might be 2 to 1, might be 1 to 1, could be 8 to 3, it could be anything, right? It's a way of comparing one number to another, one quantity to another quantity. It could even be more than two quantities. It could be x to y to z, 2 to 1 to 1, or so on. It could be 4 different quantities. But for this video, we're only going to look at 2 different quantities. For example, these quantities could be comparing the amounts of money, the ratio of boys to girls in a class, so 15 to 14, 15 boys to 14 girls, or it could be the amount of cake you get compared to your siblings. For the first example, if we take the example of some chocolate, Tim and Ted have some chocolate. It's a chocolate bar with 8 different squares in it. They decide to split this chocolate 50-50. Most of us should know that 50-50 means splitting it halfway. So I get half, you get half. In the case of the chocolate, if there's 8 squares, that would mean Tim would get 4 squares, Ted would get 4 squares as well. But what does 50-50 actually mean? What do we mean when we say 50-50? So usually 50-50 means percentages. We're talking about a percentage. 50% to 50%. We know that 50% is half of something, right? And if half of 8 squares, so half of 8 is 4, that must mean Tim gets 4 and Ted also gets 4 if it's 50-50. So this brings me to my first point. Ratios, percentages and fractions are all highly linked. So here I've used percentages and I've used fractions to talk about the ratio. Well, have we got to the ratio yet? No, we haven't. So let's try and represent this chocolate example as a fraction. So first of all, let's start with the fraction. So there's 8 squares in total. So that means our denominator is going to be 8. Makes sense, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 8 squares altogether, 8 parts. So Tim would get 4 out of 8, as would Ted. Ted also gets 4 out of 8. And like we always do with fractions, we need to simplify them. So 4 out of 8 simplifies to 1 over 2, or a half, because 4 goes into 4 once, and 4 goes into 8 twice. So they both get a half each. And notice that this half doesn't actually tell us how much chocolate they get. If I said Tim gets a half of the chocolate, you don't know how much chocolate Tim has, right? You don't know how big the chocolate bar is, so how could you? So they both get a half each. And this is where we sort of get close to the ratios. As they both get half each, we can rewrite this. So in ratio format, so a half colon half. But we don't really need that 2 there, as we know that this makes a whole, right? So we can rewrite this as 1 to 1. So this is our ratio, as they both get 1 part each. They both get a half each. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So you may think this also implies that they get 1 bit of chocolate each, but as we've just done this example, we know they get 4 parts each. So let's sort of take this back and rewind it and do it backwards. So this might be what a question might look like. The question might look like Tim and Ted both get 1 to 1 each of chocolate. There's 8 squares, let's say, of chocolate. So Tim and Ted share a ratio of 1 to 1 of chocolate, of which there are 8 squares. Obviously this is written shorthand. The question would be a little bit neater. How do we work out how much chocolate they get? So first, let's work backwards. So we have 1 to 1. So how many parts are there total? So there's 1 part there, 1 part there. So that means there's 2 parts. As 1 plus 1 equals 2. So there's 2 parts total. And let's rewrite this as a fraction. So Tim got 1 part out of the 2 parts. And Ted also got 1 part out of the 2 parts. So we know they both get a half each. And we know there's 8 squares. So all we need to do is find a half of 8. And a half of 8 is 4. So now we know they both get 4 squares each, because a half of 8 is 4, and they both get a half each. So they both get 4 squares each. Okay, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I know it's a little bit rambly, but I think better to over-explain it than to under-explain it, especially as this is a video about the introduction to ratios. So let's have a look at another example. Let's say Jane and Mia want to split £50 in a ratio of 2 to 3. So the way we work out who gets what is that the first person mentioned corresponds to the first number mentioned. So Jane is 2 parts and Mia is 3 parts. Okay, so we know how many parts they get each. Jane gets 2 and Mia gets 3 parts. So that means there are 5 parts total, right? Because 2 plus 3 equals 5. So there's 5 parts. And again, let's rewrite this as a fraction. So J equals 2 out of 5, right? Because there's 5 parts total, so that's our denominator. And Jane gets 2 of them. Mia gets 3 out of 5. As there's 5 parts total, and she gets 3 of them. So now all we need to do is find 2/5 of £50. To do that, 50 times 2 is 100. 100, oh, that should be a divide. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So Jane will get £20. We do the same for Mia. Just underline that. So 3/5 of £50. 50 times 3 is 150. 150 divided by 5 is 30, which is the amount Mia will get. So Jane gets £20 and Mia gets £30. And just as a reminder, we started with they sharing £50 in a ratio of 2 to 3. And we eventually found the total amount of parts by adding 2 and 3, so there's 5 parts total. Then we rewrite it as a fraction, so 2 over 5 and then 3 over 5. And then we find the fractional amount of the total amount of money or chocolate or bunnies, whatever it may be. So 2/5 of £50 was £20, 3/5 of £50 was £30. So now we know how much each of them get. Okay, so we will leave that video there for the introduction to ratios. For the next video, we'll go right into looking at some similar problems to the ones that we did in this video. If it didn't make any sense, maybe watch it again and try and work out that second question by yourself before having me do it again. Great, thanks for watching. Cheers.